I recently had a birthday. I tried to ignore it, but the people here at Backyard History were kind enough to have me spend my birthday right here. And do you think they would give me a decent birthday present? Nothing. Nothing. Not even a glass of champagne. When I came to Naples, it was very, very different. There were plenty of bars, lots and lots of bars. And Naples was a real drinking town. Nobody entertained at dinner parties. They would say, come and have a drink. There were no fancy hors d'oeuvres, just peanuts if you were lucky, and maybe a cracker or two. We had a few restaurants, and they were very, like Fish House opened the year that I came to Naples. Most people want to know what Naples looked like when I came. Well, it looked like paradise to me. I had my own business that I started when I was 21, and by the time I was 27, I was tired of the big city of St. Petersburg. And so one day, a gentleman that had a magazine about Florida came into my office and said, I've just been to Naples. He said, that is the most fantastic little town. He said, it's going to be a great city. And he said, you should apply for the job there. They need a Chamber of Commerce manager. Well, I just forgot that. But one of my clients was Florida Power and Light. Even back those days, I was very interested in food and cooking, and I became a consultant for them. And I had to go to a meeting there. I had lunch with the president, Malcolm McDonald, who was a good friend of mine. And just in passing, I said, you know, I came through Naples, which was really a pretty place, and I understand that they have a job there. Well, he got out of his seat, and he pointed at me, and he said, Doris, I know you've got a good business. I know that your roots are in St. Petersburg, but he said, you have to go to Naples. I don't care how little money they offer you or what, but he said, it is going to be the greatest city in the state. And of course, he was right. And over the past 60 years, it has been my privilege, a real privilege and a joy to be here and to see this city grow into the city those early pioneers wanted it to be. I don't know whether they'd approve of all the condominiums or the traffic, but they would approve because they knew that this was a great, great city. I had never done any Chamber of Commerce work, and there were 18 men that applied for the job. So don't tell me women never had a chance. I'd like to tell you that was true of it, but the truth of it was they paid me $65 a week. And I guess I was the only one stupid enough to accept a job. I had been making about $30,000 a year in my business, and back in 1952, that was a lot of money. We had one street light, one school, 2 churches, and as I said, lots of bars. You could buy a lot on the Gulf of Mexico for $10,000. It was $100 a foot and was not selling. Port Royal was just beginning. Hold on to your hats, kids. Well, hold on to some. The lots in Port Royal were selling for $5,000, and they were not selling. So I came to this town and was fortunate enough, because I was in the Chamber of Commerce, I got to know all of the businesses here. After I left the Chamber in 1956, and since most of you are women, I'll tell you why I left the Chamber of Commerce. When I came for $65 a week, I said to the board of directors, I am accustomed to living well, I'm accustomed to making good money, and I'll come for $65 a week if you'll give me a contract promising me half of what I raise. And I think there were 16 members of the Chamber of Commerce. At the end of a year, I had raised $15,000, which was a lot of money in those days, and which meant I'd be making $7,500, and I thought that's great. But they would not do it. They said there's no man in Naples making $7,500 a year. And I said, there's not a man in Naples that works as hard as I have worked. So I waited for a couple of years, and then I opened my own business. And that gave me the greatest opportunity that I've ever had. Things were tough at first. Who is really dumb enough to open a public relations agency and publish a guidebook in a town that had maybe 3,000 people by then? But this town has supported me in every venture I've ever done. And so over the years, I got to know all of the developers. What an interesting job I had for getting to know the developer of Port Royal. Do any of you live in Port Royal? I guess those people are down counting their money and swimming in the Gulf. Anyway, when Port Royal was started, I was right here. And I used to go down there and see the progress. Glenn Sample was the developer. He had started the most prestigious advertising agency in the entire world. He was the man that invented soap operas. He was a brilliant man. Port Royal, he originally bought everything that is Port Royal today for $50,000. It's now, that property down there is probably worth about $8 to $10 billion. He was so farsighted, and he was the worst snob, and really a pain in the neck. But he was my first and best client, and he always called me Madam Reynolds. I like to tell you all a story about that association. He called me one day. I did all of the layouts and advertising that appeared all over the country, and the Wall Street Journal, and Fortune magazine, Time magazine, and sales began, and houses were being built down there. And one day he said to me, I want you to put out a newsletter for me, and with pictures of Port Royal. And so I went back to the office and met with my art department, and we put together a really beautiful layout, and we called it the Port Royal Pennant. Next day I went back, Mr. Sample looked it over, and said the words that the owner of any advertising or PR agency dreads. He said, we're having a dinner party tonight, and I want to show everything about this except the name. He said, we don't like the name. We're going to call it the Port Royal Palaver. You all know what that means? It means absolute nonsense. It means not worthy of even attention. I said, Mr. Sample, you can call it the Port Royal Palaver. for goodness sakes, Dorothy, you just go back there and tell him that I don't take well to abuse. And she said, I'm not going to say anything of the kind. He'll never apologize, but he really needs you. I had the two best clients in town. And it wasn't just my work. It was all the people I met. People like Betty Van Arsdale and Billy, her son. They are such wonderful people. They had the Provincetown, Naples airport, and they had a big daddy, John, who I'm sure that if he got into heaven, somebody was really missing his sins. He was one of the meanest men I ever met in my life. He advertised with me, but I earned every single penny. He was always on my back, as were most of my advertisers. So over the years, I really learned to be this gentle, sweet, young lady that I am in my old age. One of the things people want to know is, what happened to Naples? When did it stop being that precious little town where everybody knew who you were sleeping with, who you were taking to Miami, and everything else? Well, in 1960, we had a terrible hurricane. Now, any of you that have been here for just a few years, you thought the hurricanes that you went through were terrible. They were a piece of cake compared to 1960 when we had Hurricane Donna. I need to tell you the positive things. We had not one death, but we had so much damage. And the insurance companies, knowing that a lot of very wealthy people lived here, they decided they were going to pay off every single insurance policy. So there was this huge influx. Two things happened. A lot of money came into Naples. And secondly, a lot of the rats abandoned the ship. A lot of people packed up and left. And the rest of us were left to rebuild this town. I had a magazine called the Naples Guide. And I had planned in October to have a house and garden issue. And I had sold all the advertising. I mean, people used to hate to see me coming because I was so determined. I mean, if you ever said no to me to an advertising in my magazine, you could depend that I'd be there every single day, early in the morning, waiting for you to come in. Anyway, I had sold a lot of advertising. And after the storm, I went around to every advertiser and I said, I'm going to have a house and garden issue. Because we're going to make it. We're going to get stronger and better than ever. And I want to run your ad. And after it's run, if you don't want to pay me, don't do it. And I'll understand. Do you know every one of those people paid me? And that was the kind of town that Naples was. So after 1960, we took our money and we rebuilt our houses and the building bigger and better than ever. And this began attracting people. So a lot of people began coming about 1964 and 65. Then in 1970, the developers found us. And that was when Naples was changed from being a resort village into being a city. Because when you start building condominiums and big developments with houses, you have to have more schools, you have to have more of everything. So Naples totally changed.